This, in many ways, should have been the first workshop. It's just that there was some very good reasons why we had placed the other workshops that we've already had last season to do those first, because there were particular reasons, particular requests. But the most important thing that all of us can do is to just simply use less energy, because that will mean we will have lower emissions of greenhouse gases. And going back to the original presentation that we made at the launch, we said there were three major strategies that we were following. Reduce the amount of energy that we're using, and therefore the greenhouse gas emissions and CO2. After we've reduced them, to replace with green and non-CO2 emitting energies such as solar and wind. And thirdly, to absorb more carbon by planting trees, which Kit just told you a little bit about, and we have a lot of news to come about tree planting and about trees in general, and about a study that's being undertaken. So of those three strategies, though, the first one, reduce, relates to carbon, and it relates to the energy we use. And the good part is it means that we can save money. The average household, and everybody knows that there's nothing and no one in Eden Mills who's average, but the average household, roughly about half of the energy and therefore the emissions and the costs of energy go into home energy. But as we'll see in a moment, in Eden Mills, that's not quite true. That balance is quite a bit different, and that came out of the household survey I'll talk about in a moment, which the students did last year. The great thing is what this quote says. The great thing about saving energy is that in addition to helping the environment, we're saving money. So it's an appealing thing, and there are a lot of things we can do that are actually very, very low cost or no cost and free. And the main message I want to get across today is we don't all have to be heroes. We're going to talk about a couple of people in this village who've done some fantastic things long before we started this carbon neutral initiative. But if we just do lots of little things, it's amazing how it will add up. And the beauty is it's going to help the pocketbook for all of us. And it'll increase comfort, it'll convenience, aesthetics, and what this doesn't mention, it will in many cases improve the actual value of your home. So it's very much the first strategy before you start doing anything else. I would advocate, and everybody would advocate who knows anything about this, is just use less. And we're going to talk, and Don Eaton will be talking about ways in which we can do that. When we're talking about costs, I just want to say a very, very quick point about, we buy a new fridge, we buy a new car, we buy a new window, we buy a new anything, and we tend to look at the capital, what we're paying. That item is going to cost so much, but we don't say how much it might be saving. If we spend a little bit more, and we're saving over the life of that television set, that car, to take a big item, or that small item, and over the life of the time we have it, the cost of it and the maintenance, we might find that we're actually way, way ahead. So life cycle costing is something that I think Don Eaton will be talking about in a moment a little bit more. But if we look at the initial cost and then we count in what it's costing to actually operate it or to maintain whatever we bought, and over the time that we've got it, then all of a sudden the economics can change quite radically. I'm not going to go into detail about that. That is the most simplistic way to look at it. There are more sophisticated ways, but that's also the most conservative. So if you take that method, it's overly conservative. So just to get a brief word about what we learned from the student survey. We had great participation. This is how our energy use broke down. You can see the home energy on the left side there. We're using almost as much in personal transportation and an awful lot in air travel. You can see how our energy use, so that from that first slide where the household was almost 50%, in fact, travel and transportation is a whopping amount, almost 70% of our total, 65%. So that is our biggest problem, transportation. But today we're talking mainly about home energy. I'm going to just touch a little bit on that for about 2 seconds, but this is the part we're concentrating on. But part of our abnormality here is we don't have transportation. We use our cars. We have to use our cars. We're stuck with that, and this is going to be one of our great challenges as we go forward. What the students learned is that of the things they were measuring, we weren't measuring every unit of CO2 that we send up into the air. Ian Mills came out at 10.4 metric tons. But that doesn't take account of the workplace and industry and other aspects of our lives. We were just really looking at our household usage and our transportation. If you look at the World Bank figures, the World Bank figures for Canada is that we are the second worst country in the world, or in other words, the second highest emitter of carbon dioxide. And we come in at, by their reckoning, 17.4 tons, metric tons. The US is a little bit higher at 19.9, but we can't brag because if we take the UK, they're at 9.4 tons. So compare the Canadian average of 17.4 and UK 9.4, and then you think about our village and that pie chart and how much we're spending on this area, and you can be absolutely sure we're above the Canadian average. So we're way above. When the village we were taking our ideas from, Ashton Hayes in England, our starting point is probably well over twice as high. So we've got a long way to go and a big challenge. We will be publishing. There is a report at the back there the students got. It's that thick. There are a few inaccuracies, but it's a student publication. But we're working with a new group of students. We're meeting at Linda Melnick's house on Monday, and the new students are just preparing for the next household survey. So what we're hoping is out of this workshop, you will be able to get a few tips so that by the time you're surveyed coming in this coming January, you'll be way ahead, and you'll be showing, what wonderful things we've already done. The hall, one of the great donations that we were given was sponsorships was from Enermodal Engineering, one of the top energy auditing and alternative energy companies, engineering companies in the country. They have offices in the States too. Richard Lay, my neighbor, is one of the senior people there. His president has donated doing an audit of this hall. I have a draft 27-page analysis of the hall. It's just draft. There's still some figures missing. But already we know a lot about where the energy is going on this hall. And as many of you recall, my dream is, if we could make this hall energy neutral, CO2 neutral, carbon neutral, that would be a fantastic achievement. And this is where we meet, this is where we play, this is where we have fun and concerts, and it's our center. And if this became the demonstration for the project, it would be wonderful. So that report is a fantastic start. I'm just going to give you very few quick highlights. What we found is very leaky. They did a test of how leaky this building is by a blower door test. I won't go into the details. Don may well be telling you about that. But plugging the holes in this leaky can will help a lot. Also, by far, our greatest energy loss is in heating. It's not so much in cooling. It's very little in lights, as it turns out. And it's mostly in heat. So 70% of the total annual energy cost is in heating this building. Heating the water, domestic hot water, for instance, is only 2% of the total propane that we use. The biggest heat loss is right here through the walls. And then the rest of the heat loss is, apart from the leaky air, the cold air coming in, is about equally in the ceilings and in the basement, the floor. And so it's more or less equally distributed. Now, Richard, that report will be posted once it's finalized on the website. We will have some copies printed, and it's going to be, and then the next step is we're all going to brainstorm and say, well, now, okay, now how can we fix this? What should be priorities? And then finally, I want to just briefly touch on, we're not talking transportation, I told you, but on the other hand, as we've seen, it's about 65% of our CO2 and our energy is going into it. So there are a few things. And now I have to say, I'm saying things that I don't necessarily practice. But there are a lot of things we could do. You know, we can't all buy a new hybrid car. We can't all buy fuel efficient. We can't, we don't have buses, although there is very serious talk now and discussion of getting a bus service from Guelph to here through Rockwood and so forth. So that's a wonderful initiative that's being looked at as between Guelph and our township. But there are a few things we could do in just our own driving, the way we drive. And as I said, don't look at me for necessarily doing this, but this is what, it's very, very interesting to know that for roughly every mile per hour, this is American figures, but that's 1.6 kilometers to you who are metrically inclined, or roughly every 1.6 kilometers an hour, mile per hour, over almost 90 kilometers an hour that we travel faster, we're losing about 2% of fuel efficiency. So there's a lot of things we can do. There are ways in which our driving habits can actually reduce the use of gas. And as gas prices are going up, this is becoming a pretty important issue to all of us, where we could cut our actual amount of gas usage up to 25%. Things like speeding off from a start. Pulling away fast can use 60% more fuel than if you start out gently. There are little tips like that. Jack Dahlman, who's here, is doing research into ideas for both alternative driving, for carpooling. We're hoping to put that on the website and ways in which we might carpool and we can notify each other where we're going and when. He's looking at ideas that are being tried around the world for rural transportation. There's a different pattern than for cities and for towns. And so these are things that we're looking at. But it's worth looking at, and we will post some of this information on the website of just how we drive, all of us. And I'm very much included in this. It's amazing what we could actually save just by our driving habits.